the Thieaudio Legacy 4 drivers, the Thieaudio Legacy 3 drivers, the Thieaudio Legacy 2. Wait, what? Help. Two drivers. What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews. So here is the Thieaudio Legacy 2. We got a dual driver hybrid, one dynamic, one balanced armature. Let's talk about it. The Thieaudio Legacy 2 comes in a box. Right, let's have a look at these shells then. And aren't they pretty? Yes, indeed they are. You can see they're pretty similar to the Legacy 3 there. Different color scheme, of course. We've got this transparent dark blue shell with a blue and white wavy sort of metallic paint design on the faceplate. They're pretty gorgeous. We got the same old typical 2-pin connector there, flush with the surface. And here you've got a dual bore nozzle with 2 sound tubes, one leading to each driver. And yeah, they are a very pretty IEM. And in terms of comfort, these, just like the Legacy 4 there, I can't talk about the 3s obviously because they're custom, but the 2s here, yeah, very comfortable, just like the Legacy 4. Too many Legacies. And yeah, noise isolation is really, really good. So fantastic. Love the build, love the design. So physically, in terms of physical build, these are excellent, as I've come to expect from Thieaudio. So it's a hybrid dual driver IEM, 1BA, 1DD, and the price is $99. While we're here, I also want to talk about the cable today, because for a $100 IEM, this has a superb cable. It's even arguably nicer than the Legacy 3 cable. It's probably the same cable as the Legacy 4. This one feels slightly softer, a little more supple, but they're basically the same. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that for a $99 IEM, this is a very, very nice cable. So in terms of sound signature, the Legacy 2 here has it's got a big sub bass. I'll tell you what, it has got a big sub bass and a fairly neutral mid-range and a fairly neutral, slightly subdued treble. Well, it's not really subdued, but yeah, before I get myself confused, let's just break it down, starting with the bass. And these have a massive sub bass shelf that's followed by a rather rolled off mid bass. So it's all like this. It looks like this. It doesn't look like this or like this like a lot of basses do. It's all in the very, very low frequencies. And what that does is, oh boy, it gives you some really, really nice sub bass rumble. Can't complain about that. Well controlled, deep rumbling, physical, all those things. The texture is not great, but it's not too bad either. But the problem I have is it's just all in the very, very low end. When you get to the mid bass, it's kind of lacks a little bit of body, and the upper bass as well, lacking a bit of body and forwardness there. So on some tracks, you'll hear this massive sub bass or deep kick drum hits, and then there'll be a bass guitar that's barely audible because of the way these things are tuned. And yeah, I think I would have liked to see more linearity between the sub and the mid bass. I think it just would have been better for the overall tonal balance. But you know, it's a beryllium dynamic driver, so the speed is pretty good. Although it does have a slightly blunted leading edge, I don't think that is directly a result of the driver. I think that's more a case of how the IEM is tuned. So onto the mid-range now, and the mid-range is pretty neutral. It means it's not pushed forward, it's not sucked out, it's not really thick or warm, and it's not thin and anemic. It's just neutral. It sounds actually quite natural, the mid-range. It's a good sounding mid-range. The problem is that sometimes it just struggles to gain a foothold against under the shadow of that massive sub bass. It doesn't happen on all songs, but occasionally it does. And as a result, the sound, the mids in particular, can sound a little bit recessed. They just sound a little bit distant. And by the way, these are not super hard to drive, but they are harder to drive than the Moondrop Starfield, the HIDIZS MS2. Not sure, I haven't compared it directly with either of these, but it does require a little bit of power. So to get the best performance out of the EL2, the Legacy 2, I think you need to give it a little bit more power. But I've gone off track here. Back to the mid-range. Male vocals, yeah, a little bit recessed, a little bit pushed back. Female vocals and upper mid-range instruments are presented a little bit better, but still, yeah, still kind of pushed back. Then it's a laid back sound. It's not a very forward or expressive mid-range. And then on to the treble. And there's nothing really wrong with the treble. It is kind of in line with the core mid-range. It's also behind the sub bass in the overall mix. But the treble, slightly rounded, slightly soft, but still plenty of definition there. Most of the focus is in the lower treble area, so your hi-hats and things like that, certain instruments. In the upper treble, the extension is okay, but there's a bit of a fall off in terms of the upper treble level. So there's not much airiness there. There's not really any sparkle, but it's an inoffensive treble, and it does provide good detail retrieval. But it's not a very exciting treble. It kind of sits behind, like I said, that very low sub bass and the upper mid-range hump. Now, in terms of technicalities, it's about average. It has an average size soundstage, not really big. The instrument separation is decent. The overall resolution is decent, but yeah, it's not a real strong technical IEM, but it's not a particularly weak one either. I mean, we got to remember it's a $99 IEM, which in the world of earphones and hi-fi and chi-fi even, it's not cheap, but it's not expensive. All right, so let's do a couple of comparisons now, and I'll start with the Moondrop Starfield. Now, these have a surprisingly similar frequency response. Actually, I'll switch over to the comparison between these two here. You can see the Legacy 2 is red here, and the Starfield will be grey on the graph. And you can see in the core, sort of the middle part of that graph, they're very similar indeed. But the difference is the Starfield has significantly less sub-bass presence. It's more linear between the sub and the mid-bass. And then it is also slightly more subdued in the lower treble, and it has a little bit more of a lift in the upper treble, in the audible range of the upper treble. So what does that do? It gives it a warmer mid-range. It also has a more mid-bass presence. So your average kick drum is a bit more forward. Bass guitars a bit more forward. You'll hear them more easily amongst all the other instruments, the other sounds. And in the treble, although it does have a significant sort of fall off, and it's a very smooth, soft treble, but it's got that sort of that lift in the upper treble that gives it a nice airiness. And yeah, in the mid-range, the Starfield is a little bit thicker, a little bit warmer. Which one sounds more natural? They're both pretty natural, you know, but I think that the Legacy 2 needs a little bit more mid and upper bass presence. Without that, the tonal balance is just a little bit off, and it kind of disturbs me a little bit. Probably similar to how it was with the Thieaudio Yume. I had the same issue with that, I believe. Although the Yume did have these lovely forward vocals, but the overall tonal balance just didn't gel with me. All right, enough rambling. The HIDIZS MS2. Now, this one is, first of all, it is a brighter, more dynamic sound than the L2. It's got less bass, particularly sub bass is less in quantity here, but the bass sounds a little bit cleaner, a little bit faster. And when we get to the mid-range, similarly neutral mid-range on both, I would say, but the MS2 here has got more treble energy. So it's a more lively sound, it's a more dynamic sound. This one also has pretty good, well, for the price, it has very good resolution. Detail retrieval is actually a bit better than the L2 here. And yeah, I think the overall tonal balance again is just a little better on the MS2. I think the Legacy 2, the Thieaudio Legacy 2 here, it is a good IEM. It is a good solid $99 IEM. But the thing is, it's just such a competitive bracket. There is so much great competition. It doesn't really stand out in any way, although it does look dope. It looks really good. And as I mentioned, the noise isolation is also particularly good. So if that's something that interests you, yeah, these are definitely worth a go. That about wraps it up. So don't forget, links to the full written review in the description below. Links to my social media channels down there. If you've got any comments or questions, hit me up. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, PARFM audiophile style. And if you are new to the channel, want to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And until next time, see you later.